There are three sides to every story. Yours, mine, and the truth, and no one is lying. Memories shared serve each differently. I remember my part, but remember this is close to a half a century ago. And you can't be right in every detail, nor anybody connected with this film be actually correct with the minutiae that went into it. I remember it vividly because it remains one of the high points of my career, both the film and the people in it, especially Roman Polanski.
I mean, the whole film reflects Roman's vision, and I think that in other hands, we would have a very, very different film. I mean, the masterfulness, if you will, of this film comes out of Roman. Yes, it's a great yarn, but it's Roman who told it well and in his own style, in his own vision of everything, and the precision of every shot. I know this film is taught in film schools all around the world. There was a time just before the film that William Castle called me and he said, I can't wait for you to do the part, blah, blah. And he was the producer. He said, but I think we might be doing it without Roman. And he said, and I will direct it. And he was also a director. And my heart sank. Not, a lovely man, but I knew that the power of the film would lie in Roman telling the tale.
Bill Castle, a very professional producer at Paramount, got the option of Rosemary's Baby. Now, Bill Castle was a producer of B films there, and a very good one. But the quality of his films was not the quality of films I wanted to make. At the time, I had become head of the studio, and I was half his age. So he resented me a bit to begin with, and I don't blame him. I read his submission of Rosemary's Baby, and I loved it. I loved it because it was really a horror film, but brilliantly written. And it really wasn't a horror film, but it was. It was too good for Bill Castle. So I gotta have a special kind of person to put Rosemary's Baby onto a screen. There's one director who I had seen his work, from Knife in the Water to Cul-de-sac. I was fascinated with him. This is a talent. He could make this jump out of the screen.
Robert Evans knew that I was very much into skiing and racing, and he had a project called Downhill Races. He called me and suggested that I come over to talk about it. I was in America skiing somewhere. But he had the script of Downhill Racers and bunch of galleys of a book called Rosemary's Baby. And he said, I would like you to read this also, first. I went to the hotel after that meeting and started reading. It really looked to me very much like a kitchen melodrama, for television. But as I read, I got deeper and deeper into it, and the suspense was such that I didn't stop until maybe 4 a.m. And next day I came back to the studio. I said, okay, let's do this one first.
And that started the drama. From casting to style to schedule, because nobody at the studio, number one, wanted to make the picture. Two, Polanski, you crazy? He's never made a picture in America. You're going to give him his first picture, making a horror picture? No way. When I said to Charlie Boudon, who was the chairman of the board, Polanski is the man I want. I'm here as head of the studio, and that's the only man I will let make the film.
Rosemary's Baby was the first film for me made from already existing material, and so it was a bit different. It was new to me. I read the book, and it seemed to me natural that I should make the screenplay of it. So I took it back to London, and it was extremely easy because the book has a very good construction. It did not need much fixing. It just needed to be turned into a shooting script virtually. It took me a few weeks. I can't remember exactly, but it was something about a month, I would say. And I returned with the script, and I didn't know how it was going to be received, but right away, next day, because they read fast, everybody told me that it's a good script and just too long. It was indeed a bit long, so I started cutting it down. And it was much more difficult than adapting the book in the first place.
After many meetings with Roman, we had casting fights. He wanted at first Tuesday Weld, and I wanted Mia. And he said, I don't know. She's on a television show in Peyton Place, and I don't want a girl on a television show playing Rosemary.
I, having worked on the script and having had an idea after reading the book the first time, have imagined a girl more sort of all-American milk-fed, by the way, that's how Ira Levin describes Rosemary. Mia was more fragile, more sort of baby-like. But, I auditioned few actresses, but finally I thought myself that there's nobody better than Mia Farrow, and I knew how much Bob was counting on it. He thought she was very talented, and he was right. I mean, Mia was terrific in this film.
What stuck out in my mind was there was a nude scene. There was this rape and everything. I was like, oh, I don't think I could do that, but we'll work around that. I'm sure. And I was then married to Frank Sinatra, and I gave him the script that night, and it was about 11 o'clock. And he was on his side of the bed reading the script, and I was there nervously looking for his reactions. And then at about whatever time he finished the script, he sort of snapped it closed. And I said, what do you think? And he said, I can't see you in that part. And suddenly I couldn't see me in that part, and which added to my insecurity starting the film, that the person who knew me best couldn't see me in the role.
Mia was a little left of center. That's the reason we wanted her. She wasn't just another pretty face. She had something different. Attractiveness or pretty doesn't make a part. She had you looked at her and she had another dimension. And what she didn't have, Roman got out of her.
I worked with Mia the same way I worked with other actors or actresses. I made already a few films before, and particularly Repulsion, where I worked with Catherine Deneuve, and she was in practically every shot in the same way that Mia was in Rosemary's Baby. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, It's easier somehow for a male director, I think, to work with female actors, because they don't resent being led like in a dance, Traditionally, it's the man who leads, and not the other way around. Where a man resents a little bit, and if you want to dance with the men, it's always, a little bit of this before you start swinging around. Good actors don't have this problem. They know that the director gives them this look from outside that they don't have. I know that to act well, you have to forget about the outside world to a certain extent. But what you are producing, acting, it's not necessarily what you feel. Sometimes there's a little discrepancy between what you feel from inside and what it looks like for somebody looking at you. And that person who can supply that look from the outside is the director, of course, because he's there And it is his role, in fact.
Roman wouldn't say, look, I think this scene is about this, or I want this from this scene. He would say, Rosemary, she goes here, she does this, and he's an actor as well, and a very fine actor. He would act out the scene. He does it in a way that might be extreme, but you totally get what he wants. So I found it to be a helpful shorthand. I knew exactly what he wanted. There was a rehearsal period, and they had put in detail all these tape marks on the ground to illustrate where the rooms and all this were, and the bed and the corridors and the doors opened this way. And it was a mass of tapes. I can't see anything without my glasses. So I'd put on my glasses and I'd be looking at these tapes, and I really never quite got the layout, But we were in a big sound stage, and John Cassavetes and we did rehearse some scenes because we knew we were going to jump right in New York. Walking into the building, I think, was the very first scene we shot. John and I walking in to look at the apartment.
I get a call 10 days later from New York. Bill Castle is there as the producer, and he's telling all the top brass in New York that this guy's going to cost the company a fortune, and you better get rid of him. I flew to New York, and I get a hold of Roman, and I says, listen, you better pick up the pace. In the first 10 days, you're 10 days late. You're on your way back to Poland if you don't pick up your pace. She says, but the taxis are wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. I can't work this way. I said, start working this way. Well, he did.
Bob supported Roman, even though it did take longer. But he also saw the results. He used to come on the set and say how great everything looked, and people were thrilled, and it looked unusual, and it was unusual, and not only for the content, but it was the quality of the shot. So he stayed with it. I don't know what it cost the studio, and I don't know what the pressures were, but I would imagine they were considerable.
I think that Robert Evans had a flair. I don't know how much different or artistic he wanted his films to be, but he trusted talent very much. And he was a great enthusiast of motion pictures. He loved a good movie. And he was trying to inject new blood into the old system, which started getting slightly sclerotic, you see. And it paid off.
Roman was quite a bit over schedule. But with it all, I think the picture cost $2,200,000 or something like that. And what he got on the screen, it's not normal. You have to be a little, not bent, but a little different. And he's a little different and brilliant at the same time.
Bob was supported, by the way, of all those executives who had to justify their existence somehow, and in making my life miserable. But one person that I liked very much and seen often, who was one of Paramount's leading directors, was Otto Preminger. And I bumped into him on the lot, and he says, what's the matter with you? You look so gloomy. I said, I am just getting out of a meeting, and I have so many problems. He says, what's your problem? He says, I'm behind the schedule. And he says, what about the Russians? I mean, what about the Russians? He says, do they like them? I said, they're delighted with the Russians. So what do you care? He says, they never fired anyone because of the schedule, because of lagging behind. But if they don't like the Russians, you're out very soon. And so that was the case. I mean, they really liked the material very much. And we pushed forward, but I was always very much concerned, coming from Europe, from the independent pictures where every cent counts and you don't have much chance of new finances coming if you have no more money to finish the picture.
For my own part, there was pressure to leave the film because I was supposed to do 2 films back to back, and or integrated and then move over. And this was my role in the movie The Detective with Frank Sinatra. And that date kept getting pushed back until in the end, really, my then husband just said, it's either this Rosemary's Baby or me. And then I every weekend I was flying to New York and trying to make peace and saying, don't let it come to this, But, he was Sicilian, and it was about doing what he wanted, and I loved him, and we remained friends to the day he died. But I couldn't leave a movie. My mother was an actress, a terrific actress. My father, a screenwriter and director. I didn't come from the kind of people that would walk out after 3 months working on a movie. So it was never in question, but it was an agonizing thing, and I just hoped that he didn't mean it.
Frank sent his lawyer, Mickey Rudin, right in the middle of a scene at Paramount with divorce papers. You're not Mrs. Sinatra anymore.
I just signed everything that day through a blur of tears. And I don't know, we shot something afterward, and I don't know how I did it. And then Roman and Sharon and his group of friends were really embracing, and they invited me to their house on the weekends, and they were great. They sort of held me together.
Suddenly, she's not Mrs. Sinatra, and she did the part, and I believe she was nominated for the Academy Award for it, and she should have won it. She was wonderful in it. I mean, wonderful. Frank and I didn't talk for 4 years. As a matter of fact, it got so heated. Before I go to a restaurant, I call the maitre d' and say, is Sinatra there? The Detective and Rosemary's Baby opened the same day in June. The Detective opened in good business, but Rosemary's Baby was a blockbuster. It made me an established film star in her first flick out.
It's such a compelling and strange tale. It was a big bestseller, and you totally get why. You can't put it down. The book was helpful for me because we didn't shoot in sequence. As it turned out, the very first dialogue scene that we shot was in New York City in a fake phone booth. And it was, I don't know how many pages long. It was a long, long, long take. And I'm at the height of, calling Dr. Hill and this frantic scene. And we had very limited time and access to that spot and traffic and all of these factors. And that was the first scene we shot. So I really had to have digested the whole in order to come in at such a peak moment. It's a brilliant scene where I'm doing the phone booth, and I turn around and I think it's the Dr. Saperstein, and he turns and then he walks away. And then I look again, and it was actually William Castle, who looks like Dr. Saperstein from behind. So I just thought that was so clever.
Well, Bill Castle was a wonderful man. He was really a great fellow, big white hair, cigar always hanging at his lips. But as a director, because he directed too, he was, he did this schlocky B pictures, scary with all kind of gimmicks and devices, sometimes smoke in the cinema, or seats that shakes or whatever. But as a producer, Bill was always defending me. It was really a very, very good experience, the whole thing.
Right after the phone booth scene, Roman and I walked right into traffic, and I remember Roman saying, "Don't worry about it, nobody will hit a pregnant woman." And I said, okay, but he operated the camera himself, because you can't ask somebody other than me. But we would have probably been killed had they not. We just walked into moving traffic, and they did indeed screech to a halt. And we did it like 3 times. He wanted the oncoming traffic, and he wanted, people to shout at us and all of that.
The building is a big character. And this was no ordinary building. It really isn't. I went to dinner there a few years ago. I got an eerie feeling just going in there. It's got more character possibly in it than any building in New York.
Dick Silbert, when he started working on the film, he said, I know the building in which it happens. And that was the Dakota. I never heard of the Dakota. I must have passed the Dakota many times without even noticing it. So we went on location scout, and we've seen few strange buildings of New York, and the Dakota amongst them. It was clear from the start that that's where we're going to set up the action.
The interiors were made in the studio, and the exteriors were all in New York. Dick Silbert looked at apartments all over the world. That's why we ended up at the studio. We couldn't get the innuendos and the nuances of something that's just a little weird.
I was already admiring his first film, Baby Doll, and that house. I thought, and I still think, that he was one of the most talented American designers. I did not have the means to use a production designer like Dick Silbert in my previous films, but when the opportunity came with Rosemary's Baby, this was my first request in Bob's office. When I accepted to make a film, I said I want Dick Silbert to design the film. He had a twin brother, Paul Silbert, who was the designer as well and the director. And Paul was married to Anthea Silbert, who Dick suggested as a costume designer. And that was the beginning of this group, because we all became a bunch of friends, you know, for years and years afterwards. They designed Rosemary's Baby and subsequently Chinatown.
You know, she had all these sketches that we talked about ahead of time. But one of the dresses was mine. In fact, it was just a muumuu, orange, like a Hawaiian muumuu that you see in the movie. The shoes were mine. Those little sandals that I wore throughout my pregnant time in the movie, those were my shoes. The style of the day was, hippie time. And I just wanted it to be a classic look, and she did too. So simple.
Anthea Silbert makes her costumes background, not foreground. That's what her genius is. In other words, you don't say, gee, what costumes there are. She fits into the story.
There were a lot of wardrobe tests, and I remember Anthea put a pregnant-like belly on me, and Roman was very, very detailed about how it should feel and should it move, and my breast should be bigger if I get pregnant. You know, he knew things I didn't even know. And they had several different sizes of this leotard with stomachs that they would put on me, and all of them had boobs of varying sizes. And so, I mean, everything was planned, and we were set to go. John Cassavetes was, the way I saw him at the time, is he was this older guy, and I had seen 2 of his films, and I knew him to be a brilliant director also. And I didn't even want to call him John. I mean, to me, he was, Mr. Cassavetes. And, I think I avoided calling him anything. And he was lovely to work with. When we were rehearsing, he and Roman got along so well, and they were each given a Yamaha motorbike. And they would tear around, and I got on the back of sometimes John's motorbike and sometimes Roman's a little bit. But it was a guy thing. There were guys. They related to each other. There were guy jokes. They were palling around. But as the movie went on, John had issues. If you've seen John Cassavetes' movies, you will know that they're very freewheeling, that people can improvise and I think move around a lot. And there's a lot of leeway the way he shoots for improv. Roman is absolutely the opposite. If you are doing a scene and you're lifting a glass, if your glass is to the right eighth of an inch left, or a little, I don't mean this, I mean a tiny, tiny bit. The camera's lined up in a certain way, the exactness of his shots. John wanted to improvise, and John wanted to move around. John felt it. And Roman said no. And so I'm oversimplifying, but over time, the tensions between the two different styles of acting and directing, because you have two superb directors with very, very different ways of approaching something, that the tension got more and more.
John Cassavetes was not my best experience, I must say. He didn't feel comfortable sometimes in his role, I think. When an actor has no problem with the part, he's happy, and he's kind to the crew, to the director, to everybody around him. If an actor struggles, he becomes a pain in the ass. Cassavetes was a pain from time to time. I can't say that he was difficult constantly. He had problems whenever you needed to dress him, for example, dress him up. And his role required that, you know. He felt the best in the sneakers, you know. He took off his sneakers, he had problems with his acting.
Well, John wasn't our first choice. Robert Redford was. Unfortunately, my head of business affairs at Paramount served him with papers of us suing him. And I, on the other hand, was trying to get him for the picture. He got in his motorcycle and never came back. But he was the type that we wanted, all-American, very straight type. John Cassavetes was not ordinary casting for it. John was a terribly talented man, had his own interpretation of it. I think he did a very good job on it. But Roman and he, there's no honeymoon.
Well, I liked John. I knew him, and he was not the favorite of the studio. I suggested him, and we hired him on my request. It's not like he was thrown upon me, you know. I know that being a director, he may have imagined differently certain scenes or his character, but I'm a director too, and I acted as well, and sometimes I acted for other directors. When I do so, I forget my concept and let them lead me, and I just have to serve, so to speak.
That must be the partition.
That's the back part of the original 10 with a dining room. And there's a closet over here, and then there's a closet over here. Huh?
I still didn't want to get naked, so they tried to persuade me, but I was a Catholic girl. I couldn't do that, And there were two naked sequences. There's one where Rosemary is in her dream, walking on a ship or something, and sits down. And we actually did go out on a boat somewhere near Catalina and shot that. But the girl walking away from the camera actually isn't me. They found a girl who was willing to do it.
You better go down below, miss.
Walking away would have been okay, but the being tied to a bed for days on end with no clothes on, I couldn't do it. So she did all that. Sidney Blacker was funny. He said it was a little awkward. He said because he had to paint on her chest, and he said I just had to see it as if I were painting on a canvas, or the way a butcher carves meat. They don't think of it as an animal, and he had some way of disassociating himself from painting on a girl's chest. I was actually also tied to the bed for some part where, I see the Jacqueline Kennedy-like person coming, and I kiss the Pope's ring. And actually, it's a funny story. A guy gets on top of me he has vertical contact lenses on, and his skin, he's the devil. So he gets on me and he's grinding away, and I say something, this isn't a dream, this is really happening. Or I have several lines there while he's grinding away on top of me. And at the end of it all, he stands up and he puts out his hand and he said, Miss Farrell, it was a pleasure to work with you. This is a nice actor man, with his vertical lenses and everything. I'm like, oh, it's lovely to work with you too, you know?
Well, you mustn't show too much of those elements of fantasy that she goes through in her dream. You know, it has to feel like a dream. You know, it has to be ambiguous or ambivalent, rather. You know, you just don't know whether it's for real or not.
The dreams I have.
She has a scratch on her body, but you don't know who scratched her. You mustn't show it too well, and the audience should not be able to analyze the details of it. It has to be an impression. The important thing is the sound, you know, the sound as in the dream. Some of her dreams are based on what she hears vaguely through the wall, where Minnie is screaming something on the other side, and she combines it into a dream, so it should not be too much in sync, and the lip sync should be a little bit off.
I told you not to tell her in advance. I told you she wouldn't be open-minded.
I remember I was always thinking that if I do a dream, it will be very silent, very quiet, because that's what you really feel when you dreaming. It's never loud, you know. And when people talk, it has sort of this type of atmosphere and this sort of voice. And in fact, comes probably from the fact that in that sequence of sleep, when you dream, you're totally paralyzed.
Roman was so young and so full of ideas and enthusiasm, you know, that he was on fire with making this happen in the best possible way. And so his imagination was alight. All his artistic sensibilities were at the fore, and it was fun to watch him. And Bill Fraker, the cinematographer.
Bill Fraker was such a wonderful person, such a good guy to have around, so gentle, and so scared of the studio because his experience was linked with Universal. Universal in those times was like all studios are today. You just had to obey executives in charge of various parts of production, read the notes and follow. And coming from that studio, he had this discipline and didn't know that he can allow himself much more freedom. Every cinematographer has his style, and his style was revealed in this movie.
Actually, Bill Fraker had a field day because he worked with a director who knew who he wanted. Bill Fraker was usually better than most of the directors he worked with.
It was probably the first film where he had this total freedom and time to do what he wanted to do.
Listen, you tell him I won't take no for an answer. Oh, here's a nail. Now, Ed.
Thank you. I knew Ruth Gordon before the movie for Mutual Friends for maybe a year or two. So I couldn't wait till she came and joined all these guys. But then what I didn't know, she came and I thought she would play with me or something. Because, I was such a kid. And it was all this energy pent up to be indoors month after month. So they gave me a ping pong table. I thought, great, Ruth will play with me. Just clueless. Ruth, when she wasn't working, went into her little, Roman called them huts, her hut on the soundstage. And she correctly, she didn't want to goof around, She approached the role in her own immaculate way, from her years of experience. And Roman so thoroughly enjoyed everything she was doing, her drawl, her way of talking. I don't know if it was written in the script when I dropped the knife, which was a feat in itself, from a oh God with raised hands to drop a knife so that it goes blade into the ground. And Ruth picks it up and does that on the floor because that's her floor. I think she made that up. But everything she did, the way she ate in our sequence of eating, a certain thing of turning the fork, it was so much fun to watch her. It was way extreme because I wasn't playing it extreme like that. But I think it was, comic relief, but it was also real in its way.
You're up and around?
On my birthday,
Yeah, the film needed some humor, and Ruth Gordon and Patsy Kelly supply it. You know, in each scene they appear, there's, you know, a bit of humor in the film. Like in life.
Patsy Kelly, I think it's my favorite line in the movie is that Patsy Kelly saying, "Shut up with your old gods or we'll kill you, milk or no milk." I just love that. I love the way she said it. I love the line itself.
For me, the right casting is always more important than having the perfect actor.
don't mind your own business.
Let Rosemary rock.
I think the greatest actor, when he's not cast right, it's a mistake. And I really wanted those characters around Rosemary to be the way I have seen them when I was working on the script. So I made the drawings of each character and showed it to the person who was in charge of casting at the studio. In those times, they still had a casting a director attached to the studio, and because they had even actors on the contract in those times. And they presented me photos of actors that would look more or less like my drawings. And that's how we went about it.
Sidney Blackmer was the kindest man you could ever meet. And I remember him saying he had to do Hail Satan, Hail Satan. Somebody on the set, and I think it was Sidney, said, "No good will come of all this Hail Satan business." And fortunately, I didn't have to say Hail Satan. I'd say, "Oh God, oh God." I, as a Catholic who not very much earlier had wanted to become a nun, there was an edginess for me to some of that stuff. The devil part, I 13 years of Catholic education and nuns and a very devout family. I mean, Good Friday was on our knees with the drapes drawn and statues covered in my house. So this thing of the devil, you know, and also especially, I guess, the end with everybody hail Satan and the birth of the devil, and that's the way it's kind of left. It was unsettling.
When I read the book, what was upsetting me that there was, you know, the real devil in it somehow behind, and you know, being philosophically a realist and agnostic at that time, I would say, it bothered me. So I thought that I can get around it by creating a film in which the idea of devil could be conceived as Rosemary's folly. We never see anything supernatural in it, and everything that occurred that has any kind of supernatural look occurs in her dream, as in the book, by the way. And it could have been all question of her paranoia, of her suspicions during the pregnancy and postpartum craze.
I felt in seeing the movie that it was clear that it wasn't in her mind, that we didn't see the baby. We have her, he has his father's eyes, you know, that kind of thing. I think Roman's choice probably was that they didn't have the kind of tricks that they have now, that where he could create such a baby.
Gradual clearing by tomorrow night.
Or maybe it was the wiser thing just not to show it and imagine it. But it was great that it isn't spelled out, that there's leeway to think, oh, is she having, you know, some hallucinations?
I thought that showing the baby would be a great mistake. I never did show it. And there is a subliminal moment when she remembers the eyes she saw in her dream, you see. But other than that, the film, it's totally realistic. There's nothing supernatural in the film. And everything that occurred could have happened in real life.
Boy, you were really kapow out of your mind.
Dick Silbert, one day he said, "What are you going to do about the editor?" And he told me about Sam Osteen, who was finishing Mike Nichols' The Graduate. Sam was not free enough because he was still finishing Michael's film. So he suggested to share the credit with one of his assistants. And that's how I started the relationship with Sam Osteen, who was the greatest editor I've ever met, and from whom I learned, if I ever learned anything, I learned it from Sam. The first cut after we finished the film was about 4 hours. And we didn't know exactly how to deal with it all. And I said to Sam, listen, you do this first, because I wouldn't know, from which end to approach that problem. And that's what he did. He cut it down to about 2.5 hours, and then I started working daily with him until we got the result that you now know. I tell you, what Sam taught me was to be really tough with myself. That sometimes you have great scenes of great shots, which are in themselves phenomenal and could be kept for the posterity, but they don't do much for the film, see. That the storyline or a rhythm suffers if you leave them in the movie. And my editing improved from film to film because, and thanks to Sam Osteen, even now, very often I think of him.
And when we finished the film, the front office, which was in New York at the time, didn't want to release it. They didn't know how to sell it. So I went to a friend of mine who was president of Young Rubicon. It's a very large advertising agency. I told him my problem, but I can't release this picture because the whole advertising department doesn't know how to sell it. And the picture's brilliant. Goes to see it. He says, Bob, I'm going to give it to you straight. It's not an easy picture to sell. And I'm not going to take one dime from you to give you a whole campaign on it. But if you buy what I give you, I want $100,000. I walk into the chairman of the board, Charles Proudhon's office. He says, take a look at this, and you tell me if you want to write a check for $100,000. And I turn the board around, and there it is. And it was a mountain and a carriage. I just prayed for Rosemary's baby. That's all. And he looks at it, and he becomes so pale that he says, why does these shoes that I'm wearing? He said, I have to pay him $100,000 for 3 words? He said, that's right, and he did. And Pray for Rosemary's Baby became the ad of the year. It made the picture. Without that, Pray for Rosie's Baby with a carriage, people wouldn't know what it is. And they still didn't know, but they were intrigued. It just opened the first weekend to the biggest business Paramount had done in years.
You know, you can't really judge anything you're in, but I was stunned by what Roman had done. I mean, I knew it would be great, but I couldn't have imagined the lighting and how the shots really looked and moving with the camera and everything. I thought it was wonderful.
It was the beginning of a new genre. Well, The Exorcist followed The Omen, there are several films that Rosemary's Baby de-virginized. What they have today in its place is, to me, very watered down, non-human. It's all digital. It's one big machine. It's not people. That's why there's nothing quite like it. I went to a screening of it about 9 months ago. It scared the living shit out of the people there.
Yes, it's a horror movie, and maybe the theme isn't so serious, but I think it's a great movie. And I don't think I've done another. And I don't think I ever got another role. I know I didn't get another role as fine as that asked as much of me. And I know I've never worked with a director that was as precise with me, because his almost silly little cartoon saying we go here and we do this and we do this and we do that. How we worked so well together, how I gleaned from that exactly what he wanted, was we worked really well together and we never had to talk about it. It was the happiest work experience, the most fulfilling that I've ever had.
I was happy to do Rosemary's Baby. That was one of the best moments of my personal and professional, of course, life. It was the discovery of the Hollywood film industry for me and a lot of people around me, particularly Mia Farrow. Both of us had this great experience of doing our first Hollywood movie together.
There's no cut and play, nonsense, no machinery. It's the mind. And he knows how to manipulate the mind. And to manipulate the mind on film and make it work is one piece of art.